Hey friends, welcome to the Energy Independence Show. Today we have Scott Salandy-Defour of Liquidstar. He is known, or Liquidstar is known as the Uber for electricity. So we will be talking about how to light up the world today with smart off-grid batteries, decentralized autonomous utilities. Welcome to the show, Scott.
Hey, how's it going? Thank you for having me.
Sure thing. So can you tell us a little bit about yourself and what motivates you in the energy industry?
Yeah, sure. So my name's Scott. I'm a former, as I call it, an ex-management consultant. Before doing a startup, I did about 8 years of management consulting. Towards the end, it was really focused on emerging technologies and innovation. And some of the clients that we work with were utilities in the US. So really looking at wearables and IoT. And once I started doing that, I kind of was like, oh, there's an opportunity to do some of these things on my own. And that's really when I got the sort of startup bug, and I tried a couple different things, and Liquidstar is one of the projects that I'm kind of the most passionate to come out of that time.
Awesome. Well, can you tell us about Liquidstar and your role there?
Yeah, sure. So I'm one of the founders of Liquidstar. Liquidstar is actually the spin out of a blockchain IoT company called Chain of Things. And basically, what Chain of Things was doing was they were looking at the connection between, as I mentioned, blockchain and IoT, and how basically that can create interoperability between devices. And so we started looking at different areas, and energy obviously is one of the best use cases for blockchain, and in particular the connection with IoT. And we came up with Liquidstar, which is the Uber of electricity. And specifically to answer your question, it was kind of the idea really came from looking at what happened in Puerto Rico, where we saw a lot of people like Tesla, install these like really large batteries. But when we look at the picture, all the wires were destroyed. So it doesn't matter if you recreate generation, those types of things. If there is no distribution infrastructure, you're kind of out of luck. So what we looked at was, okay, how do we change how electricity is delivered? And our first main focus of a use case was actually disaster relief, but it's actually very difficult to plan a business around an intermittent event like that. So fortunately, we were able to reach out to some of my personal connections from my management consulting days. And, we spoke about the idea of having people deliver batteries in places like Nigeria. And it just really kind of took off from there. They were super excited about the idea, like did a lot of research for us on the ground, helped us to design the solution. And that's kind of how we sort of ended up here.
Well, that's great. Yeah, I know people, friends that have dealt with the crisis over there in Puerto Rico and come out of it with a leadership role. And it's nice to hear that, what happened in Puerto Rico, the disaster there is what's motivating you worldwide. So it's always nice to hear when crisis turns to something good. So
Exactly.
on question three, what role did Startup Bootcamp Australia play in helping you guys?
It was awesome. I mean, really, the main thing I think that they help with, for me personally, I'll start there, is just unlearning some of the habits that make someone a successful management consultant, right? So in particular, there's something we called like analysis paralysis, and I think there's a tendency to really try and like overanalyze, overplan, like those types of things, when in reality the best thing to do is just to get out there and get started. So they really helped us with things like that. Just refining and shaping up like our business model, go to market strategy, because what we're doing is really complex because we're working in emerging markets across the globe. So we definitely needed that help in sort of like, okay, how should we best structure all of this, and really just it's very hard to like describe, but the expertise of the crew. So Richard, Trevor, Abs, like they're just awesome at giving you straight shooter advice. So maybe it's an Australian thing, but I think the advice that they gave us is not the typical advice that you'd get from accelerator or boot camp. It was just straight to the point, like, you guys need to do this because of this, like, stop messing around. So it was exactly what we needed, as they say, like a kind of like kick in the butt that those guys definitely gave to us. So we're, happy to have been a part of the program and taking what we learned and trying to move forward to that next step.
Right. It sounds like a real boot camp military style.
Yeah, yeah, it definitely is.
So, question four: what pilot programs do you have going on right now?
Whew. So we have a few in a couple different countries. So right now, we're in between pilots. So we did two small, as we call them, nano pilots in Lagos, Nigeria, really just to test our assumptions and hypotheses. So those pilots kind of confirmed a lot of things, like, okay, what's the price point we need to charge? Once we scale it up to do sort of a full pilot, like, what's going to be the repayment period on all of the, like, infrastructure that we install, that type of thing. So we're working in Lagos, Nigeria first with a company called Vista Advisory Partners. They're the ones that we started with pretty much from day one, working on this. And so they kind of have a remit to help electrify all of Nigeria. So it's a great partner to have. They already are invested in actually traditional generation plants. Actually, so they're invested in a natural gas plant in Lagos. So yeah, they've been like a great partner, really helped us to not be like the typical Westerners that are like coming in being like, oh, we have all these ideas, and be like, no, no, guys, like, this is how you should do things. Then we also kind of through that, we got an opportunity to do a pilot in Benin, which is a country in between Nigeria and Togo. And that pilot is cool because it is our battery rental idea, but they wanted us to add a larger battery to do e-mobility, to help them create an electric motorcycle taxi service, because they realize that the current, like, the diesel taxis are very noisy, they pollute a lot, those types of things. So we're really, really excited about that pilot, obviously, because that's something we thought we'd be doing maybe 2 years from now, and it just happened now. The next pilot that we just got confirmed is we're a finalist in the UNDP Food Resiliency Program in Kenya. Yeah, that came from just someone messaged me, was like, "Hey, you should apply apply to this," and we did. And I actually, something I remember at Startup Bootcamp, we were doing pitch for beers, and I was like, "Oh, I forgot to, like, send in this application," and I sent it in on a Friday, didn't think about it, and then they got back to us. So excited about that. And then in the more negotiation stage or finalizing detail stage, we are talking to the Indonesian Small Villages Ministry about deploying our solution there, to some of the small rural villages, because obviously if you have thousands of islands, distribution and transmission is a little bit difficult to do at scale. So that is a pilot that's starting in 1 to 3 small villages and has the potential to expand to up to 430. We're also speaking with a group called Acted in Lebanon through a separate UNDP office about using our solution there. And then finally, we are talking to players here in Australia about using our solution during natural disasters. So we kind of have like a wide range, and, like, weirdly, as a startup, like a global reach in terms of, like, who our potential clients will be, because we want to be more B2B as opposed to B2C. So yeah, it's it's definitely challenging from that
Yeah,
aspect.
absolutely. Well, I see why you snickered when I was like, "Hey, what kind of uh, operations you got going on? What kind of you know, what do you call them? Programs going." But anyway, so yeah, it sounds like you have a lot going on. On question five, besides the pilot programs, how can energy access, and you touched on it, how can energy access increase food resilience?
Yeah, so I think one of the things to mention of, like, the why behind why we're doing this is that our personal belief is that actually electricity is the key to accomplishing all of the UN Sustainable Development Goals, because everything from food, water, health and education, they can all be increased exponentially with access to electricity. And food in particular is an interesting one because what a lot of people don't realize is that the IoT devices that go to like improving crop yields, they all require electricity. And in these remote regions, there is no electricity. So if you want to use IoT to better manage your water and do more advanced irrigation, you need electricity. And some of the newer technologies as well, like obviously there's a lot of work going on with using drones in farming, right? That requires electricity. You need to charge the drones, like those types of things. And then I think the last part of it is that we really believe in the future of like container based vertical farms, but those use a tremendous amount of electricity. And so you need to start setting up this quasi decentralized infrastructure to be able to power all of those different applications. So really, just to answer your question more specifically, really we see electricity as the key to enabling a bunch of other food resilience technologies.
Absolutely. Well, it's really exciting. We've talked before about battery power, off grid energy, providing the opportunity for remote areas for farming. I think you guys are taking it to the next level. And speaking of that, how can wireless on question six? How can wireless electricity bring the developing world into the modern age?
Yeah, so I think how we view liquid stars, it's actually the gas station of the future, right? So when you think about it, these ICE engines, whether it's in a motorcycle, a generator, those types of things, you're going to see investment stop there completely over the next like 10, 20, 30 years. So what we look at it is like, well, if you have companies like Volkswagen saying like we're not investing anymore in ICE technology, it's like, well, electric cars don't work in these countries because they don't have um, access to electricity. So we really are focused on sort of pushing these countries to the next normal a bit and looking at Liquidstar as kind of the sort of hub to accomplish that. And on that goal, right? I think for us, we look at it like what happened with in the US. I remember in college, there was this big initiative to like put broadband into all the dorm rooms. And then it was like, felt like 2 years later, it was like, no, no, we need to do wireless throughout the whole campus, right? So our long-term, let's say 20, 30-year vision is that at some point, the wired part of electricity is super inefficient, especially in developing countries. It's difficult to maintain. As you saw in California with PG&E, they went bankrupt because they couldn't afford to maintain their wires and it caused like a fire, right? So we look at it as that like the next normal is going to be some form of wireless electricity. What it is, we're not sure, but we feel like we're creating the infrastructure to sort of enable that in the future in a lot of these countries.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it sounds like, on question seven, you were born from this crisis in Puerto Rico, and now we're talking about the future and how that can turn something, from the past that was a struggle to something that's good for the future. On question seven, how can natural disasters be helped with Liquid Star? How can you guys help with those sorts of situations?
Yeah, so we look at it like that why we design our solution to like manage these solar container based charging stations is that you can literally put them in the back of a plane, on a helicopter, on a truck, and deploy them in super remote regions that have been ravaged. And so what we saw when we examined Puerto Rico is that actually 10 months after the storm, there were still over 1,000 households that didn't have access to electricity, and most of the deaths that occurred were a result of after. So first of all, they were after the storm, and a lot of them were because of lack of access to electricity. So you can't power like a refrigerator to keep medicine cold or water cold or food cold, all of those types of things. So really what we see is that Liquidstar is a solution that kind of can be used to in these unplanned outages deployed to a region. People can come and pick up a battery to power like small devices. So you keep your phone charged, TV, laptop, and maybe on the large end keep food in your fridge good. So an example, so kind of to go back to like one of your earlier questions, like why I always thought of what I always thought of is that like my mom actually used to work for the energy company in the DC area, Pepco. And, sometimes with outages, our neighbors across the street would put up a sign that was like Pepco sucks. And I was like, oh, that's awful. But I personally would always like, man, I just wish I had a, a battery to like charge my phone or to like play Xbox and TV. And then here in Australia, what we found when we were talking to some of the electricity companies is actually they saw people putting their refrigerators in the back of their like trucks and driving it out to like a centralized location with electricity, right? Because everyone assumes people use generators, but if you've had a horrible natural disaster, that petroleum infrastructure is also extremely difficult. Petroleum and diesel infrastructure, getting the fuel to the generators is also very difficult to have happen. And they were like, yeah, like we can't be driving trucks with gasoline through fire areas, right? So we really see it as kind of an alternative to generators for disaster relief, just to keep people connected, like have some basic power for basic devices.
Well, speaking of people being connected, on question 8, how is Liquidstar working with blockchain technology?
Yeah, so as I mentioned, we're kind of a spin out of Chain of Things, which is a blockchain IoT company, and then our sister company is a company called BlockPass, which works on decentralized identity. And so for Liquidstar, we think that we're solving a few different problems in emerging markets, right? Identity is actually a big issue. People don't have their own identity. And everything we do, we're like, okay, what is the next normal? Let's not build on the rails of the past, right? And I think even in the US and especially in the UK, sorry, Europe, where they have GDPR, this concept of owning your identity is important. So that's kind of one of the foundational aspects, is that to sign up to our platform, we're not taking your data. You are signing up and you're going to own your data, your identity that goes on to this platform. So that's number one. The second part of that is the device identity. So by doing IoT on blockchain, you increase interoperability, like traceability, all those types of things that are important if you're doing like a utility scale project. And then finally, I think one of the most important problems is this idea of trust, right? So a lot of the countries that we're working in, trust is extremely, extremely low between parties. So there are some ways in which blockchain helps with that. And on that idea of trust, one of the ways is like with regard to microtransactions as well, right? So, it's very difficult to sort of do these like fraction of a cent, 2 cent in US dollar terms, 2 cent, 50-cent transactions at scale. And so that's one of the areas as well where we plan to use blockchain is as well to help manage those microtransactions. So I think from what I described, there's like three different stages to our plans for it. So the first is, as I mentioned, this decentralized identity, giving people ownership of their identity, zero knowledge proof, those types of things. So we don't need to know all your information to give you access to our platform, right? The second part of that is this device identity, and that's important because we have something called a secure data logger, which has been deployed actually in a few solar farms, and it's actually similar to, I think you spoke to Niels from Renblock. In some ways, it's similar to what he's doing, where it allows people to have a good idea of where their electricity comes from. On our end, it lets us know that like, okay, the energy in this battery was 80% from solar, 10% from grid, 10% from like a generator because it was raining or whatever the case may be. So there's that. And then the third part, as I mentioned, which is like something in the future, is just using this basically distributed ledger technology to help better manage micro transactions and help with reconciliation.
All right. Well, that's the last or one of the last questions here. Question 9 is, what do you think the future of energy looks like?
Yeah, so I actually, a lot of my friends ask me this question. I actually think the future of energy is Tesla. And I think that they're really an energy company, not a car company. And what they're creating is actually a way to distribute electricity without wires. So, you know, in my mind, I see it as like you have a Tesla that can autonomously drive itself to go get energy from a dam that's maybe like 100 miles north, come back, pick you up from work, take you home, plug into the grid, and use electricity that way. So that's kind of how I see it. And then as well, we also see a lot of these other technologies, right? Kind of, you have like SpaceX that's creating this like uh, you know, sorry, the wireless network, or the cell network that they're creating. And then also kind of along that, you have that new there was an article that was talking about a plane that's using like microwave transmission to power like solar panels, right? So to get like concentrated energy, and like that's where we see it going. So when we talk about Liquidstar internally, it's like we want to be the Tesla energy for the developing market. And so why we say Uber for electricity is that if you think of Tesla as well, they're planning to use their cars to kind of be Ubers eventually autonomously. And so that's really our view, and where we see it going is that this current infrastructure of wires, which are just really expensive to, number one, build, but also to maintain, it's going to get replaced by these quasi decentralized utilities like ours, but also these Tesla cars that have huge batteries. So one of the things we looked at in was in if you take all the Teslas and they're in the world that are in existence, assume there are like a million of them, they have enough capacity in their battery packs right now to provide energy to all of Los Angeles, right? And so as that technology increases, gets more dense, I really think you're going to see a lot of utilities kind of be like, wait a minute, why don't we just buy a bunch of these like Teslas or Tesla semis, whatever it is in the future, and transport this electricity from location A to location B? And kind of our justification for that is that there's a study that came out that said by 2040, batteries are going to have the same energy density as like traditional dinosaur based fuel, right? And so when you start to think about like that and what that means, you sort of realize like this is the future of energy, and there's no reason for these developed countries to sort of try and mimic what we've done in the West, when in 20, 30 years, which if you know anything about utilities, that's kind of like the repayment period, that it's normally like 30 to 50 years, the repayment that you need. That technology that they're trying to install now is going to be out of date by the time they start making money from it. So yeah, I mean, we just view it as, like we said, like Tesla energy of the future. I think for us, more people are getting it because there is the Reuters article about their plans to sort of become an energy distribution company. So we're focused on doing that specifically for emerging markets. That's really our vision and goal.
Right. Well, I've been excited since the crisis of Fukushima in Japan about vehicle to grid technology and the opportunity it can provide for people to be more resilient, but also in the developing market. So it's exciting to see what you guys are doing there, and wheels on battery, or rolling wheel batteries, are really, I think, the future of energy. A big part of it. I think you really described that well. Before we let you go, Scott, on question 10, in these trying times, do you have a favorite quote or something uplifting you could share with us before we let you go?
Yeah, I think I thought about this, and I think the quote is actually just do, right? Because there's a lot of what we've experienced in this space personally is that there's a lot of talk. So there's a lot of people that are like, oh, this is a great idea, like da 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 da, like this is necessary, but the action and follow through on a lot of people that we've talked to really just isn't there. And so for me personally, when I look at all of these like trends and social causes, coronavirus, everything, there's just so much talk, and there are very few people that are willing to act, or in our case, I guess, willing to take risks investing in those people who are willing to act. So I think I'm not sure if it's the most uplifting quote, but I think my thing is like, less talk, just do, because in these times we need people like all of us, like ourselves, that are actually getting out there and like trying, and maybe we fail, maybe we succeed, but we need more people doing that, and we need more people taking the risk and backing up people that are trying to solve these like really large macro problems. So to put it in context, I should have mentioned earlier, there are 1 billion people without electricity, right?
Mm.
And so we are doing what we think is the best way to have a private sector solution. So incentives are aligned for everyone to solve that problem. And it's kind of weird because we feel like if we're doing like a nonprofit, we'd get more funding in a weird way. And our personal belief is that like those types of things aren't very scalable or very efficient allocations of capital, right? Because you're not going to attract necessarily the best and brightest people to work on something with a limited upside. So yeah, to sum it up, I think it's just do. Like we need more people out there getting their hands dirty, getting their boots on the ground, or at a minimum, like investing in and propping up the people that are actually going to these places that have these large problems.
Awesome. Well, thank you for enlightening us to the self-interest of doing. I agree with you. I think that it's time just to do the things that we've talked about, the things that we've dreamed of in these challenging times. That's how we get past struggles, is we overcome them by doing. So, thanks again for your uplifting quote there, and for your time. Thank you for joining us, Scott. We will see others like you, and we'll talk more. If you're listening, we encourage you to join Energy Independence Group at facebook.com/CIG Solar or on LinkedIn. You can also find us on other social media platforms to keep up with the news. Again, thanks again, Scott. We look forward to chatting with you and seeing you down the road.
Thank you. Have a good day.